burst of rage from the Admiral. "You lost Dolus, poor fellow," mused Northe. He didn't even look angry. Maybe the Admiral really had mellowed with age. "Sir, he isn't dead, just lost. I had to leave him behind because the Fireblade was being fired upon." That part especially grated on Leard. He had never left any of his tiny crew behind before. He winced at the remembrance. Slee, his assistant, had screamed they were going to be blasted to nothing if they didn't run. If they ran, they could come back for Dolus, the one who had been stranded. They couldn't come back for him if they were dead, so Leard had agreed to run. The mission had been simple: scoping out an unfamiliar planet as the possible site for another base. Laird's ship, the Fireblade, had landed easily in the jungle of the planet. But the second Dolus had left the ship to scout, something on the planet had fired upon them with more force than Laird's tiny ship could handle. They had been forced to run. Dolus had been stranded. Now Laird's ship was damaged, and Dolus was gone. Leard had never felt like such perpetually busy at a computer archive terminal. "Here," she announced, coming up to him as he stood contemplating his transformed vessel. "Oh, I hope this thing works." She whipped out a thumb-sized camera. "Captain, please." "Would you take a picture of me standing in front of it? I'm going to document this whole voyage." Leard awoke from a vivid dream. Returning to open space after spending time in port always did that to him. Slee was standing next to him, taking a panoramic shot of all the newly installed controls in front of him with her camera. "I don't know if you're illegally allowed to do that, you know," he told her. "No worries, sir," she said, turning the camera on him. "These will go in my triple encrypted files. Nowhere else. Here's my fearless captain," she narrated. "We're on a mission to rescue Dolus, the only man I know who could get himself stranded under fire on a planet that's supposed to be peaceful and nearly empty." A monitor in front of Leard beeped, and words appeared on it. "Acceptable distance to activate mini-drive model 345989 reached." He felt his ship slow to a halt. They were in a position to activate the mini-drive. "I checked everything. We're ready as far as I can tell. If Dolus were here, he'd know for sure." Slee pointed the camera at him again. "Now, at this very moment, we, the adventurous test dummies, will decide the fate of the Stellar Intrepid. Do you have any historic words, Lieutenant Captain Leard?" "If we die, Northe better not put a cactus anywhere near my grave. Thus shall he be remembered in the annals of history." Leard grasped the lever on the newly installed mini-drive. The words on the monitor read, "Ready for drive activation. Course 51, 5, 6, 87, 25, 9, 117. Destination, planet Iamid." Leard drew in his breath. Then he pulled the lever. Module 2. Dolus awoke. The taste on his tongue told him his sleep had not been from exhaustion, but from some form of drug, something mineral-based from the metallic taste on his tongue. He wondered who had captured him. He was tied to a chair, but smiled to himself because he knew he could easily free himself by simply taking the chair apart. The bonds even looked weak enough for him to chew through them. He'd always been resourceful and inventive, even as a child. Perhaps that was why he currently felt completely calm. Dolus began shifting in his chair, deciding on the most comfortable position. If he was going to be tied up, the very definition of enforced downtime, he could certainly use it to catch up on sleep. A man entered the room. "Who tied you up?" he shouted at Dolus. "Not my orders for sure. Here, cut yourself loose." He flung a knife, blade first, at Dolus. It landed in his lap, nicking one of his legs, but Dolus managed to move and maneuver the knife so he could grasp it. The man came and stood over Dolus, smiling. "Welcome to Iamid. I run this place. My name is Xiquo, and I'm going to kill you." The ride was as smooth and sure as a mirror. They did not need to monitor the ship's course now that the coordinates for Iamid were programmed. trees were hundreds of feet high, and their trunks proportionately large. This place is... Out of the tail of her eye, she saw something shiny. A door in one of the tree trunks. It looks metal. Yes, I found something. Use caution, said Leard. I always do, she replied. She switched the communicator off and was about to move towards the door when a large cold hand clamped over her mouth, and she felt herself inhaling a bitter vapor. Module 3. Slee, is that you? It's me. Slee opened her eyes to discover that she was lying on the floor of a faintly lit room. Across from her, on the floor, sat Dolus. Dolus, she cried, bouncing up happily. I was so afraid I'd never find you. We didn't want to leave you behind. You're all right, right? I'm just glad I found you. But where are we? What happened? Dolus frowned. You don't know who's our captor? No, said Slee. I can't say next? Well, began Leard, striding forward. I understand your problem, and mine. Obviously, your objective is to gain control of something. That's the whole formula, isn't it? I see it all the time in my job, and if I don't, it's on the newsgrams. Simple. All you do is lure some low associate, of course the higher the better, into a trap. And when the boss comes blasting to the rescue, you kidnap him, and the process repeats with his boss, all the way up the chain of command. Eventually you get to the top, and then you've taken the top, and thus command of the galaxy. From the galaxy you go on to the rest of the universe, if desired. So that's everybody's general plan. However, none of them have gotten far past the secondary boss phase. Some even struggle getting the associates. But you've done better with very little effort. Congratulations. 100 higher ranks to go and you'll have the galaxy in your hands. What do I matter? I'm only one rung on a high ladder. Xiquo was silent, listening. Leard continued, gaining confidence. The chain reaction has begun. But Xiquo, you overlooked one thing. Even one rung on a ladder makes a difference if you're climbing it. That's where I come in. When one rung is missing, it's that much harder to climb to the top. I'm going to stop the chain reaction. Leard produced a small silver cylinder. This is a poison cell. Inside is a computer chip that alerts higher command the second I use it, so they won't come after me. I'll be eliminated. What happens to a formula when one factor is eliminated? Realizing what was happening, Xiquo screamed, "No! No! No, Captain," Slee shouted. "Don't do it," yelled Dolus. Leard raised the empty poison cell to his lips. At that moment, the ceiling split open. Module 5. It was perfect. Earlier, while Northe had professed his inability to come to Laird's aid via communicator, he and Leard had had a triple encrypted conversation on a text-only channel. Another conqueror. Bring guns, lots of guns, few people. We're slaved, shouted Slee excitedly, as Northe's powerful, heavily armored ship continued to demolish the ceiling over their heads. Another has come, cried Xiquo triumphantly, raising his hands in victory. A stun beam shot from the bow of Northe's ship. Frozen, as still as a statue in the stun beam, Xiquo the Conqueror remained in that victory position. "Sir," said Leard to standing Admiral Northe, "I've been thinking about why this doesn't add up." Now back in space, they were in Northe's ship, where Xiquo had been safely stowed in one of the more secure prison cells. He was now peacefully sleeping off the stun beam effects. Slee and Dolus were alongside in the Fireblade, where Dolus was jubilantly inspecting the mini-drive. "Both my assistants have told me Xiquo was up to something else," continued Leard. "Firstly, Xiquo acted alone, though he tried to hide it by appearing in the dark and wearing different outfits to pose as a guard. There was no one else in that base with Xiquo. He had no lackeys, no staff. So why pretend he did? He couldn't succeed alone. What he did was not in my formula." "What formula?" asked based on an image I took of him on my camera. He matches this fellow right here. Take a look. It's his personal file," said Slee. Laird looked on the screen. On it was the personal file of a man who looked exactly like Xiquo, except his name was Whom Nertius. "Xiquo is this fellow, Whom Nertius," continued Slee. "He's a native of Iamid and a convicted criminal, but according to the personal file, he escaped from prison 6 months ago, and according to the planet's files, Iamid's prisons are some of the nastiest in the galaxy. Nothing like ours." She paused. "Sir, this was all a trick. He had no aspirations to become a conqueror. He got us to capture him, so we would bring him back to Blodwyn Base and lock him up here instead." "Which is exactly